This is the Sony A7C and this is the Sony ZV-E10. It's safe to say that both of these cameras are absolute powerhouses when it comes to content creation, but is one really worth thousands of dollars more than the other? Today we're going to put these cameras head to head to determine which one you should buy. What's going on, guys? Zak Kincaid here. So these two cameras are honestly very similar on the spec sheet. Both of them are 24 megapixels. They both shoot 4K with great autofocus, can shoot up to 120 frames in 1080. Both have flip out screens. Both can shoot in Sony's log profiles, and both take a wide variety of E-mount lenses. In fact, I'd go as far as saying that at least on paper, these cameras have the exact same capabilities. Truly the only difference is full frame versus aps-c, and of course the price tag that comes along with it. The Sony ZV-E10 comes in at $799 with the kit lens, whereas the A7C, although 2 years old at this point, still comes in at $2,098 with the kit lens and is considered the entry point into Sony's full-frame cameras. Now, this initial price gap is only part of the story, and I'll get into that a little bit more later, but for now, let's dive into these two cameras and determine which one is right for you.
So let's start with the size and build of the two. Both of these cameras are considered entry level in their respective category, but don't let that fool you. These cameras are far more powerful than your typical Canon Rebel. The only thing entry level about them is their smaller size and button layouts. Both of them are extremely compact, but the ZV-E10 is quite a bit smaller. That's pretty standard across the board. The A7C has a small grip, but the ZV-E10 is the same form factor and smaller. The A7C has a flip screen, the ZV-E10 has the same thing, but smaller. They do have slight differences in that the ZV-E10 has a power zoom rocker if you're into that kind of thing, and it has a microphone grill that can be covered by this little fluffy thing they've included. The A7C on the other hand has a viewfinder, although it's not the most useful, a true mode dial rather than just a button on the ZV-E10, and of course, IBIS.
One of the biggest surprises for me is that the Sony ZV-E10 not only comes with a mic input, but also comes with a headphone jack. You normally don't see this on entry-level cameras, but Sony decided to add it anyways. Now, as far as the build of the camera itself goes, the A7C definitely feels like the more premium option, and it should with the price tag that follows. It's got a very solid build and mostly metal construction, whereas the Sony ZV-E10, it feels very plastic. It feels more like an entry-level camera, and it honestly doesn't feel like it's capable of as much as it actually is. Now, let's go out and compare these cameras. We're going to start with photo, then move into video and S-Log2, as that's the best performance you can get out of these 8-bit cameras, and then we're going to move into a low light test both in photo and video. Now, to keep things fair, we're going to film everything on the Sony 50mm f1.8 because this is a pretty affordable lens that most people will be able to get with one of these cameras. Now, keep in mind that the ZV-E10 is an aps-c sensor, which means that you're going to have a 1.5 crop factor. Now, what this means is that on the A7C, we're going to get a true 50mm, but on the ZV-E10, we're going to get a 75mm focal range, which means we'll have to step further away from our subject to get the same composition.
Alright, both of these were shot at f1.8 with the same shutter speed, auto ISO, and auto white balance. The first thing I noticed is that the ZV-E10 underexposed a little bit and does look a bit warmer, which I do not mind, but as you can see when we correct it, I prefer the composition on the ZV-E10 because it's shooting at a 75 focal length, which in my opinion is better for portraits, but both of them look very good. And in low light, the A7C is a bit cleaner, but again, I think I prefer the composition on the ZV-E10 just because of the 75 focal range, and when we go ahead and edit both of them, you get a very similar image, and you could always take the noise out of the ZV-E10 in post. Personally, I think the A7C with an 85 would have looked the best. Video was shot handheld, and when we throw our technical LUT on, you can see the A7C handles the highlights a bit better, and the ZV-E10 has a lot of camera shake from being so light. We can eliminate some of that with active stabilization, but we do get a bit of a crop. At 120 frames per second, they both look really good, but again, the ZV-E10's highlights just blow out a little bit. When it comes to a moving shot, both of them are pretty bad at this just because of how light they are, and even with A7C's IBIS turned on, you still get a bit of camera shake just because it's such a light setup. The ZV-E10, however, has a lot worse rolling shutter and it can be seen, and then the active stabilization, well, I wasn't really trying hard to stay stable, but it's bad. In low light, the ZV-E10 surprised me. Although not as clean as the A7C, it still looks really good and is pretty usable. No problems here.
So which one should you buy? Well, to be honest with you, 90% of people should just go with the ZV-E10. You get extremely similar performance to the A7C, but at a fraction of the cost. And if we're being honest with ourselves, most people who are content creators aren't filmmakers. They're not concerned about having the best of the best image. They just want something that works, has a great image, and allows them to tell their story. If you do decide to go further in your filmmaking journey, having access to the log profiles will give you a very valuable skill and a great workflow to learn at a fraction of what the price point used to be. So where does that leave the A7C? That's a little bit more difficult. In my opinion, the only people who should be buying the A7C are those that are already invested in full frame and they're looking for a second body or travel camera, or those who know they're not only going to be using this for content creation, but for client work as well. This camera, along with a decent set of lenses, is going to be expensive, and the only way to justify spending that much is if you know you're going to be making that money back. Sure, Sony does have higher end cameras, but in all honesty, unless you're doing super high-end client work, this camera is going to be able to get the job done and your clients are going to be very happy with their results. So which one of these is right for you? Leave it down in the comments, and if you plan on picking up either of these cameras, I have a link in the description for you. If you've enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave it a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.